If I came to you and told you under threat of violence that I was going to force you to move your SIM card into a $200 Android smartphone for the next 6 months, how would you react? Would you react with abject despair, sadness, and anger? Quite possibly. But today, we're looking at a $200 smartphone, the TCL 30XE 5G. This thing is, like I said, $200. It is a T-Mobile specific variant. And it might just change your mind about $200 cheap smartphones, because this thing packs some specs. They're actually pretty darn impressive. Let's take a look here at the box and see what it has to say before we unbox this thing. So first off, this thing is a 6.52 inch HD plus display at 90 hertz. You remember when 90 hertz was a premium feature? I mean, like I do. I remember when that was something you paid extra for. But here we are. We have a octa-core processor, a 13 megapixel camera. There's a weird camera array on the back that we'll talk about more as we go on. And then 4,500 milliamp hour battery, which is quite large at 18 watt charging, which isn't the fastest in the world. But again, it's still fast charging, and that is still pretty decent. And I think that the appearance of this thing, it looks a bit industrial, right? It's not something that's going to turn a lot of heads, but I think that it looks fine. You've got a pretty darn good screen to body ratio. So let's now just take this thing out of the box. I want to see what it looks like and how it does feel in the hand, because those things are very, very important. We got the phone right up here first, and let's just set this aside for a second. Let's let the anticipation build. Let's see what we have in the box. And shockingly here, we actually do have a charging brick. Oh my Lord, they sent a charging brick with this thing. Now this is USB A to C. I wish it was C to C, right? But we're not going to look at gift horse in the mouth. Samsung, Apple, Google, everybody else who isn't shipping a charger with their device, who I have anger towards. Here is the device itself. And let's see if we can take this plastic off. I think I accidentally just turned the thing on. I did. So from just a general feeling perspective, it feels okay. This thing feels quite solid. It doesn't feel super heavy. I'm comparing this here to something like a Pixel 5, which does feel a bit more dense. The weight is actually really similar between the two, but that is a rather large screen. Again, Pixel 5 next to it for comparison, that is a large screen on this bad boy. And of course, you can see here that camera layout. I have an LED flash and then 3 cameras up top, which, if I'm not mistaken, is a 13 megapixel primary and then a 2 megapixel depth and a 2 megapixel macro. So I'm not sure how well those are going to work, but we do have a rear mounted fingerprint scanner, which I do quite like. And the screen here looks pretty good, pretty vibrant, pretty bright. There might be a little bit of color shift here off axis, but it's really, really minimal. I think that the screen looks pretty good. We're getting set up here. We do have a little notch here for the selfie camera and a little bit of a larger chin down below. I almost would rather have the thing just be symmetrical, right? Just have the chin and the forehead be the same size and maybe throw in some speakers in there. 3.5 millimeter headphone jack up at the top. And then of course you've got power and your volume rocker on the side. As I'm rolling through this setup here, we have an option here for something called NXT Vision. Next Vision maybe is how that's meant to be pronounced. And it says here, use Next Vision to help improve your multimedia visual experience. Basically, it's supposed to automatically be enhancing the image contrast, sharpness, and dark details, enhance the color and contrast of games. So we're actually going to leave that on. Maybe we'll turn it off. I don't know. But for now, we're just going to leave it on and see what we think. We have, of course, button navigation down here at the bottom. I'm assuming this is something that I'm going to be able to go in and change because I don't really like button navigation. Enter privacy app with 2 fingers swiping up for 2 seconds. What does that mean? Oh, you've got like apps you can hide on your launcher. That's a pretty interesting feature. And this launcher here looks to be their stock launcher. It looks like we got a Google feed here on the far left-hand side, and then your app drawer is a pull up. Got it. You've already told me that. Let's see how fast unlocking this thing is. Maybe you can see the light on my hand. That's pretty quick as far as the fingerprint sensor goes, and that's to be expected. This thing's not in the screen, it's actually on the body, and that generally does make it quite a bit quicker. Let's jump into the camera app here and see what kind of settings and what kind of appearance we have here. This looks pretty standard, although I do love having the Google Lens built right into the camera. That is a great feature, and I like that a lot. Okay, let's see what kind of shutter lag we're dealing with here. That is pretty quick. Let's look at some photo samples here. So this first one here, I noticed that we get pretty good dynamic range control here. The light isn't super blown out, but as we get to the edge over here, into the darker areas, got a lot of grain, not a lot of detail there, but is it passable? It's passable, not great. Stepping outside though, the dynamic range is again good. The shadows are preserved pretty well. We've got pretty decent detail up here in the tree itself as this does load in. It looks okay. That is a totally passable, serviceable picture using portrait mode on my dog Rutherford. I think this actually worked pretty good. Maybe that depth sensor is coming in handy there. Something weird going on here in his ear. Yeah, a little bit of weirdness going on there, but overall, pretty solid looking portrait mode photo. With the selfie camera, I think the selfie camera looks okay. This is pretty blown out here, but otherwise, detail's okay. Beard hair test checks out pretty good. Portrait mode with the selfie camera looks okay as well. I've got a lot of hair and it's kind of wild sometimes, and that's a problem with a lot of cameras. I think it handles it okay. What about the macro sensor? I got some snow on the ground, so getting up real close, and it is sharp and in focus, but it's a 2 megapixel camera. So how well does that work? How well does that hold up? Not super great, but it's cool to have, I guess. And then one more shot here to get kind of the colors and the details. Again, this is a passable image. It's not going to blow your mind or anything, but is this a camera you could pull out, take a quick picture with, and feel happy with? Yeah, very likely. Obviously, a full review is coming. I'm going to dig way into this camera, but so far, it looks okay. Let's go ahead and jump into the settings here, and this looks like pretty standard Android settings. And let's go to navigation, and we're going to turn on system navigation. We're going to change this to gesture navigation, and that's going to save us some screen space down here at the bottom, and it's just what I'm used to using. Okay, everything running quite well, and this is actually running pretty smoothly. I mean, we are talking about here this being a MediaTek Dimensity 700 for the system on a chip. It's an octa-core processor, but we've only got 4 gigs of RAM, so it's going to be really interesting to see how this thing does hold up over time. But so far, it's moving pretty snappy. Couple of things I've noticed. Let's fire up Twitter here, and you'll see that it loads up pretty quickly. I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest with you. But here's something that I noticed. When you swipe up to go to your multitasking, it says here, swipe to corner to trigger float window / split screen, right? So let's go back into Twitter here. Let's swipe up and then take it up here to this corner, and it's going to go straight into split window, where you can then launch another app should you choose to do so. Let's do YouTube, and you're running in split window. That is a really intelligent way to get straight into split window. And if we click on this button here, we can get to a switch. We can open up an app drawer to change what apps are down there. We can maximize it and then throw Twitter into a floating window, which can then be full screen back out. There's a lot of really good functionality here, a lot of really good multitasking. Look how easy that was. I'm actually really impressed with this. And again, it's a MediaTek processor and 4 gigs of RAM, and we are absolutely rocking and rolling. Let's see what the media consumption experience is like here. So we're on my YouTube channel. Obviously, I don't want to get copywritten. So let's open up this morning's video when I'm filming this, and we're going to go full screen here. And I gotta say, for a 720p screen at this size, this does look quite sharp and quite nice. As for the volume on this thing, it is just these speakers here bottom firing, right? You're not gonna have stereo speakers, so get used to that.
22572 update because that brings some other stuff. But we're starting with the...
And they sound just okay. Let's go ahead now and jump over to some music, and we're gonna let this play for about 3 seconds. And okay, so the speakers are relatively loud at high volumes. They are distorting quite a bit. You don't have a ton of bass. They don't sound particularly great, but again, it is just these speakers in the bottom. They're not stereo. Speakers are probably a bit of a weak point. However, if what you plan on doing with this is watching YouTube, things like that,
what's going on, guys? I've got a pretty quick little news update.
that is absolutely going to be doable on here. Not the best speakers in the world, but totally serviceable. Circling back around to that system on a chip, that MediaTek MT6833 Dimensity 700 5G system on a chip. This is a Geekbench score, and this is not a phenomenal Geekbench score by any stretch of the imagination. I will definitely do some gaming tests on this thing, so that'll either be part of the full review as that does come, or maybe it'll be a separate video depending on how you guys kind of react to this one. But look, for most, like I've said before, for most day-to-day stuff, just running normal apps and going about your life, that's going to be plenty good enough. All right, guys, that's about all I've got for you today on this unboxing and first impression of the TCL 30XE. Like I said, there will be a more in-depth full review coming down the line with some more stuff like gaming on there as well. So far, though, I think this looks pretty solid. Like I said, it is a T-Mobile exclusive phone, so keep that in mind. Thanks to TCL for sending this thing over. I do appreciate it, and I can't wait to test it further and bring my information to you guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for making it to the end of today's video. I'll see you on the next one. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.